just want to go live.
Oh,
We are live. I'm just carefully going, no, I don't want all these extra steps. But welcome, everybody. It is almost the end of January. Where has January gone? But we're here in various different weather climates, everything from sleet, rain, and I don't think we've got any sunshine here between the three of us. But anyway, here we are. So I don't know, this is a new venture between the three of us, because actually this is more of a conversation than per se something around fixing anything. It's not about per se productivity, performance, or coping strategies. It's really about noticing what, when pressure quietly, or what pressure quietly does to us over time without us quite often sometimes even noticing and realizing. So as ever, my compadres in the conversation, but yeah, I guess this is it. The aim of this was very much around recognizing that the world is evolving. It needs more spaces of honest conversations where it's just a human space, and so we're creating a human space. Yay. Where to use my favorite phrase, Dan might struggle with this one, but to get out of my curly whirly thoughts through my curly whirly hair, no offense, wow. I can loan you some. But I think,
I'm good. I embraced that long time ago. No problem for me.
Well, I'm having it cut in a couple of days' time. I can send you up.
Oh, you're going to have it done like mine?
Follicle racism, Laura. That's a tough start.
Was that below the belt?
Not at all. I can take it.
I guess, I think for me, we've been all, I don't know, going to say dancing around the conversation in various different social media exchanges over the last week or so around this idea that actually we don't know how much pressure we're building for ourselves because we're so in it. And what the challenge is with that is because we're so in it, we don't realise that we've slowly lost a sense of bigger perspective because we're so focused, and we're getting stuff done. And so why should we challenge that? So yeah, I mean, I know. I mean, Mark, you commented back to, I don't know, one of my posts. I can't remember, but you made the comment. It's like you were so in it, you couldn't see it anymore. How hard you were pushing, and I guess that's probably the lived reality of a lot of people, no?
I would say it's the lived reality of an extraordinary amount of people, Laura. Like, we all, to a degree, feel under pressure. Do we feel under more pressure today as in 2026, as opposed to how people felt in 2000, in 1986, I'm going to say 46, but let's avoid World War years, or it was at the end of it. But I just mean, like we all feel under this amount of pressure. Where is it all coming from, this pressure? And I know, and we'll talk to that how we handle the pressure is key. But where is all this pressure coming from right now? Is it the advent of technology that means that we don't have space, so we stay under pressure? Is it the work that we're doing and the demands and requirements of it? Like, I find it very interesting. I'll be talking to clients across a range of industries, and like the ones I expect, right? The financial services that I came from pharmaceutical, heavily demanding, right? Every single person I speak to is under a huge amount of pressure. No one I speak to has got like, oh God, I have a very easy Thursday evening, very little to do, I can take it easy. I've never heard anyone say that to me. I was only talking to a doctor this morning about coaching, and he was talking to me about the intensity of his job for the last 10 years and how he doesn't think he can cope with it any longer, and as a general practitioner. And so who is not under pressure is an interesting starting point. And if every one of us is under pressure, then what's wrong? What's heating everything? What's heating it all up?
And that's absolutely right. And is it because we're so focused? Is it just because of increased demands? Is it just because we've become so focused on the immediate task in hand that we've lost that sense of perspective? And without that sense of perspective, that thing that we're focused on, it feels like it's the only thing and nothing else matters. I don't know, Dan, what do you think? I mean,
well, I feel like in the modern world, we've forgotten what life's all about. I mean, all this pressure, right? But what are we here for, essentially? What's it all about? What's human existence about? And I remember one of the very first conversations you and I ever had, Laura, was, we have no time for being anymore in our lives. And we are human beings. We're not human doings. We're not human havings. We're not human thinkings. We're human beings. And I feel like, is that Mark's dog just came in?
That's my dog.
I feel like...
Be more puppy dog.
We live in a world now where pressure comes from everywhere and everything, economic pressure, family pressure, gender pressure, national pressure. It's like we live in this pressure cooker in today's world where we're not allowed to stop. We're not allowed to pause. We're not allowed to just be. It's like, we've got to be doing something. There's always something to do. I've got so much on my plate. I've got kids to look after. I've got my parents to look after. I've got my career to worry about. I've got pets to look after. Do. It's like, when are we going to make some time for joy and awe and wonder and just being outdoors, just being with our family, just being with our friends, not with some end in mind, not with some pressure to get something, to do something, to be somewhere. One of the real big revelations I had in the last few years, I've always been striving for more, striving for better. And I always felt like there was somewhere to get to. And I think it was probably about 18 months ago, maybe a year or so, suddenly the penny dropped. I was like, everything I need is right here, right now. I haven't got anywhere to go. I haven't got somewhere to get to. It's all here for me, right here, right now. If I will just stop and be present with it and let it in, and not just allow the pressure to either be making me think about the past and what's gone wrong and what I'd prefer to do better, or all the things I'm ashamed of or regret, or worrying about the future and catastrophizing and doing all the what ifs. It's like, why don't we just have the time to deal with what is?
I think it's that often. I think you almost get into a cycle. And I think sometimes I don't even know whether there is even the catastrophizing that even that far. I think it's just we're in the motions of what is the next thing I've got to do. What is the next thing I've got to do? And I wonder whether there are people who actually even get to the bigger part. But I guess, what is the cost of putting our heads down? I mean, you eloquently shared it there, Dan. The cost to you was like, well, where was I going?
Yeah, where was I trying to get to? Right?
Where is, and I've said this before, when people talk about it, it's like, well, where is it we're going? If I push harder, what's going to come? But I think it's what happens as a consequence of doing that, being in that moment, because things gradually get squeezed out. And Mark, I'm back to your example of having your head down and then realizing that the things that you'd forgotten about because you got your head down. What do you think we lose first when we're so focused and so in that pressure as opposed to aware of that pressure?
Example I think of, right, and I'll go to a personal example after this, right, but it's to the point of everyone being under pressure. When I was in university, it's not today or yesterday, but what was that, late 90s. And so, you got a university with a degree, you could get a job, right? There was a lot of employment at the time. It was a very good time to be in Ireland, okay? And it was fine. Like my degree now, I wouldn't be worth writing home about. But then nowadays, if you go to university, to get into employment, you have to have a first class honours degree. So I went to university with the express intention of enjoying myself, right? That was reality. I'm not going to pretend it was anything otherwise. I got an education. My education was multifaceted. You know,
Social education.
Yeah, absolutely. I got an education. I have a lot of skills that some stand to me today, some don't. You know, but
but yeah, blooming good time, eh?
yeah. But so and to the thing, right? What do you lose? So you're a kid, right? And there's already such pressure in the school system to do your best to get the course you want. And I was only talking to someone the other day, and they're like trying to get their kid who's 16. Coaching to figure out what career they should take on. And I was explaining to my last 3 clients did, like, one of them was trained in horses and now works as a salesman. Like, you know, one of them ran pubs and now runs an environmental management company. Don't worry about what you do in college. Worry about the skills you learn. Worry about what you learn. But that pressure to be, and therefore that pressure to get that first, means you don't get to enjoy the world around you. And even more, you don't get to discover who you really are, what you really want. So all that pressure means you drive and then you get that first. You get that college space, you get that first, and then you get that job. And then it's about 10 years later, you're like, I fucking hate this. What am I doing? Why am I here?
How did I end up here?
I know. How did I get here? Because you haven't had the chance to go, Jesus, maybe this isn't me. And I think it's like, how do you keep a horse walking in a straight line? You put blinkers on it, you know? Do not let it see the world outside it. So we all have these blinkers on us to it. And I know we do in so many ways, but when we're in that pure pressure zone, like, there are people who will have a passion for something and they will put the blinkers and the drive on to make that happen. Absolutely fantastic, because that's who they are and that thing is them. But for the rest of us, who aren't even allowing ourselves to experiment and figure out what's right by us in the world, then we find ourselves waking up. There was a brilliant cartoon I used to have on my desk in work years ago, and it was from the New Yorker, and it was of a guy, and he was waking up and he was in bed and he was putting on his trousers. There was a girl in the bed, and he goes, you know, the way we went out and met one night and, like, we got married and had kids and stuff. I'm sorry, I wasn't serious about any of this. I just didn't realize it just all happened, but I'm going to go off and live my life now. It's like, it always struck me as how you fall into things because you're not paying attention to anything else. And I think what we lose is we lose whatever else is happening in the world, and we lose ourselves within that.
And that's something I really recognise. I think it's in the pursuit of the next thing is, you know, it's so quick for us to, I don't know, I'm thinking of the word blocking out. But, you know, I don't think it's as obvious as that. I think when we're under pressure and got all these things that we're kind of putting ourselves through, we lose that sense of acknowledging where we're at, what we want, why we're doing it. We just carry on doing it. And then sort of 6 months later go, oh, my gosh, you know, why did I do that? But I think your point around, you know, the 16-year-old sort of, you know, trying to educate them, it should be about exploration. It really should be at that point in time, because skills can always be learned, but your passion, and if you can, like, sort of tap into that, that's, you know, the key thing for me. And I think that's what needs to be nurtured, because everything else is just an environment and a name above the door, really, isn't it? But I guess, you know, as we sort of, you know, what I think ends up happening, I think you've alluded to both of you, is that in that space where we're kind of so focused and we're loading under pressure, kind of lose our sense of perspective. We lose our sense of, I'm going to say, humanity, and because I think it's being able to see that bigger picture. We get our context, we get perspective. But when we're so focused, you know, we start to lose a sense of self. It's not even really obvious. And then we suddenly go, oh, how, you know, to your New Yorker cartoon, you know, suddenly how did I end up here? and it can happen. It just erodes and erodes and erodes, and and then you get into a cycle, and you just go, okay, well, I end up here. But I don't know. I guess it's not necessarily a huge breakdown. It's just gradually like a drift over time, really, isn't it? I mean, I don't know, Dan, what do you think?
Yeah, you end up like an airplane that's just going half a degree off course every year. And of course, the more you do that, the more you leave who you are. And all this pressure, when pressure becomes stress, we then become stupid. Literally, it's in our wiring. You know that the prefrontal cortex goes offline. That's our creative thinking. That's the area of our brain that separates us from apes, right? That's what makes us human. That goes offline. Too many of us spend our days stressed and then coping with stress, and sometimes in very unhealthy ways. And we don't allow ourselves time to feel, right? And it's our feelings that give us the clue. You talked really eloquently about passion, Laura. How do you know when you're passionate about something? By how you feel about it, by what it does to you inside. And the modern world, right, it doesn't want us to sit and contemplate and be inactive for a bit and just think, how do I feel about this? How do I feel about that? What do I feel pulled towards, rather than what am I feeling like I should and I have to and I ought to do because my parents said so and my education said so and society said so. I've got to earn money and I've got to do this and I've got to try and get a house and I've got to get economically active. It's like, whoa, says who, right? Let's have a bit more time in our lives. We all go through transitions. And Laura, you talk quite a lot about having that anchor, right? Who am I? What do I really care about? And why do I really care about it? And that's something that changes throughout our life, right? The stuff that I really care about and lights me up that I'm passionate about now isn't the same as when I was 30, isn't the same as when I was 20, and isn't the same as when I was 16 and some div in a suit was trying to get me to decide what I was going to do with my future. It changes, it evolves, and we just don't give ourselves that time to grow and evolve and to understand what our values are, right? This is so important, what our core values are, what really matters to us. Because every single choice we make, we are choosing one value over another. And if we're doing that unconsciously, we're living haphazardly. We're living by somebody else's rules. We're living by somebody else's definition of a success. I mean, how many people listening to this and watching this have actually defined what success means to them and how to measure it themselves? Or have they just taken on rules from somebody else, what somebody else says success looks like, right? And a lot of that is about accumulating material things and getting status. And for some people, that is what they want to do. And that is what drives them forward. For most of us, it isn't. That's just what the culture tells us. And there's so many of the guys I work with, right? They get to kind of midlife. Some of them are selling businesses and moving on. Some of them are, getting to a point in their corporate career where they're thinking, no, this isn't it. But they don't, from the outside, they look successful. They've got everything society said they should get: the house, the car, the family. Some of them have got a swimming pool. They eat at nice restaurants. They go on 3 luxury holidays a year. But they're flipping miserable. They're not happy. They're not fulfilled. They've got no purpose. They've got no meaning in their life because they just haven't got the time to sit and go, what do I really want? What do I really like? What lights me up? What makes me, what am I passionate about,
And I think, for me, it's really interesting because, you saying how you recognize how you've evolved. Whereas actually, for me, how I see and I recognize the very essence of who I am actually hasn't changed that much. If I look at over, and so let me give you sort of a tangible thing of what I'm trying to say. Things that I will always bridge gaps, connect dots. I will always endeavor to reframe things. That's at the very essence of who I am. And I don't think that's changed from when I was 17, 18 to I'm a few years older than you guys.
It's more about how you direct it, Laura, isn't it? No, I don't think the essence of who we are does change, but I think as part of the human experience is evolution and growth, isn't it? So therefore, where, you know, the sort of dots that you're joining are different to the ones that 30 years ago. So.
Yeah, and I think once we recognise that, it's like actually everything else is just an environment, a name above the door, a frame. But I think one of the things that, you know, I guess I find quite interesting is that, you know, been listening to something this afternoon, and what they were talking about, and it was very relevant for this work around pressure, that it's not going to let up because the world is becoming more complex, etc., etc. And they talked about that it wasn't, you know, burnout, it wasn't mental health, it was what they were calling mental fitness. And I think you've used a similar word, Mark, in a recent post, a similar type. And the first thing I went to in my head when you'd written it in your post was a phrase I heard about 3 or 4 years ago: mental wealth. And that's not, you know, per se mindset or anything. It is back to what happens to us when we're under sustained pressure. It's a narrowing of judgment, clarity, perspective, but we don't actually even realize that we're losing it, but it's impacting what they were calling their mental fitness as a piece. I guess I can't remember, Mark, how you phrased it. You've been to a talk or delivered a talk around this, and I thought it was very interesting.
Yeah, it was from mental health to mental strength was the angle I was taking on it. Yeah, and I use those terms, mental fitness, as well, and that's a lot of it. Like, you know, that idea, not head down and doing this, and I can't have to do this, you know, and it's because, you know, we don't know how not to. You know, we haven't learned the skills or the art to not do that because we believe we're important. We believe this has to happen. We believe if we don't do it, something catastrophic will happen. There is, I drove past a graveyard today, and it's absolutely littered with people who thought they were important, which is quite interesting, you know, because none of us are important. Time passes. Like, I've worked in places where, like, you know, someone decided to leave. We're like, what are we going to do? How are we going to replace this person? And guess what? We replaced the person. Because really,
2 weeks later, you were like, who?
Yeah. Like, it didn't matter. I used to joke with anyone when they were on my teams and they'd hand in their notice. I'd say, "You're dead to me now. That's it. You're dead. You know, this is enough." Like, you know. But one of those things is because we think this is the most important thing in the world. Like this is a simple vision, right? But, and I know I've been there. I've been sitting here working late at night. I'm going to have to get this done. And I've had a small girl go, "Come on, Dad, will you bring me to bed?" Like, yeah, you know, I'll be with you soon. I have to get this done. This is really important. Now, that was really important. That's what was really important. Like, this is not really important. This is something that might matter to a certain amount of people. It might matter to shareholders. It might matter to a client, but it is not really important. Yeah. You know, I think that's a very, very interesting thing that we miss because we got that head down with that tunnel vision because we think it's important and we think we have to. We think if we don't do it, no one else is going to do it. But maybe the reason why no one else is going to do it because they know we're going to do it. So here we are doing it for everyone else. Because we haven't realized that we get into that space. And the values piece ties into that importance things. What really matters to you? You know, what is actually important in your day-to-day life? Because when you get into that vision and that tunnel vision of these things and I have to do and I have to do, what do we not do? We're saying yes to this all the time. So what are we saying no to? Our kids, our family, our health? You know, all these other things are getting a big no. Like, one thing, an image that always strikes me, Laura, is years ago, I was at work and I was like that, head down trying to get something done. And this girl was over talking to me and she said to me, "God, you can tell you're stressed." I was like, "What the fuck do you mean I'm stressed? I'm not stressed."
Like veins bulging at your head.
She goes, "I know you're stressed because you shut up and you're not talking." I was like, "Oh, okay." Oh, no lights. And
a power cut then, Laura.
And for me, that was such an interesting insight into me. I didn't realize that. I didn't realize that when I get really stressed, I shut up. And only recently, there was something going on, and I was just I was thinking through. And my daughter goes to me, "Are you okay, Dad?" My eldest. And then it goes, "I'm crying." She goes, "But you're not talking. You never don't talk." I was like, "Okay, do you know what? Good point. I'm not talking. Why am I not talking? What's going on with me that I'm not talking in that space, you know?" And like, that's, so who am I? So how am I human? Like, where do I lose my humanity under pressure? I shut up and I lock myself in because I think that's what solves the problem, but it doesn't, because I lose myself in doing that, you know. And I think it's interesting how we can't see that. I can see it now, and I can sometimes I still miss it, and people point it out to me and go, "Oh God, you're right. You know, it's there, like, you know." But that's why that's those blind spots. And why is it a blind spot? Because I've got my blinkers on and I can't see.
Yeah. And that's it. And when we're in that space, we do end up losing our humanity because we're not connecting with perspective, with reality, with other people who are effectively going to ground us and go, look, you know, we're putting into perspective. You know, it's the whole thing. You know, it's the phrase, "What you focus on grows." But, you know, to the point of it grows, but then actually you can't see anything else. But I think, you know, in some of the drive for the pressure for the, you know, getting there, wherever there is, and pushing the other side, comes from this piece where people are constantly going, I need answers, I need tools, I need solutions, where we don't give ourselves the grace of what's really missing, which is space, pacing, pause, perspective, so that we can understand the greater position, because we tell ourselves we haven't got time. But I think it's that thing of, you know, I know, Dan, you said, you know, leaders don't all have all the answers, and I agree with that. However, I also would add a nuance into that actually, I think so many leaders don't take the time to see the bigger perspective, to hold the frame, that actually none of that is not necessarily about fixing. I don't need per se somebody to step in and support me. It's finding a space that will hold me to be able to have conversations, to unwhirl my curly whirly brain at times. But I believe I do have the answers, and I use that very, very carefully, because I don't mean that I'm going to miraculously be able to say to you, and now we're going to write, you know, this is how the next 10 steps are. More that by being able to, I suppose, share that, I can see more clearly the frame as a leader to be able to hold, in order to be able to support those who I'm working with.
So you can get to an answer rather than
absolutely. So I do believe I have the answer of the frame.
Yeah.
But in that moment where, you know, I often call it a conversation for one. There's only so much I can have a conversation one and get a different answer. And at some point, but that's exactly what happens in that, you know, I've got nowhere who's prepared to just listen, effectively download and do nothing with it, because people are so quick to go, well, I've got a solution here. Here's my 10 tips. I don't need 10 tips. I don't need more. I just need people to be able to work with that space.
And it's connection.
And that's what people are not so good at, I think.
Yeah, and I think that's what we're really missing. And you know, we're talking about staying human under pressure. Well, what does it mean to be human? Well, humans are social animals. We're at our best when we're connected to others and when we collaborate. You know, I always think humans are like a jigsaw puzzle, and each one of us is a piece of that puzzle with our own unique gifts and talents. We all have something to bring to the table, right? But in the modern world, whilst we're more connected than ever, thanks to digital technology, we're actually more disconnected than ever. And so in order to be social animals, what skills do we need? Kindness, empathy, compassion, being able to walk in somebody else's shoes, curiosity. These are the things that make us human. What are the things that stop us being human? Judgment, hatred, division, fear. And this is what is now driving us all apart. We're all way too quick to point the finger. We're all way too quick to focus on what separates us instead of what unites us, because what I know about humanity, having been lucky enough to travel in lots of places over the world, we are all the flipping same, right? We all have we're different. We're like snowflakes, right? but we are all the same thing. We have the same blood, we have the same DNA, we want the same things. Our families are important to us, our friends are important to us, our tribe is important to us. And the beauty of being in the modern world now is the whole world can be our tribe. We can connect with humans all over the place. But instead of doing that, we're dividing ourselves. We're concentrating on what doesn't, the differences instead of our similarities, because there's much more similar than there is different. And that's what being human is about. That's when you feel at your most human, when you're connected with other people, when you're doing things with other people, when you're lifting others up to help them succeed, or vice versa. I had a ridiculous week last week. Everything went up in the air. It's like somebody got the chessboard and just went, whoa, there you go, Dan, deal with that. And the only way I managed to navigate it was other people, was the kindness of other people, was being able to trust other people, was the understanding of other people. Otherwise, I'd have been in terrible trouble. Now, that mental strength, that resilience, luckily, I've been working for years on that resilience. Yeah. So I didn't catastrophize. I didn't go under. I didn't feel like a victim of it. I was able to take a beat, take a breath, and just go, okay, so this is what you're doing in life. This is the ball you're throwing at me today, right? And who have I got around me now that I can turn to? And that's what being human is about, right? And I think that's the thing. When we're under pressure, we've got to remember there are people around us, people who are willing to help us and to support us, kind, empathetic, compassionate people. The world is full of them. I know it doesn't feel like it when you watch the news and you look at TikTok, but it is.
And I think that's it, is, when one's thinking gets heavy. So in that moment, last week, the Jeff was like, woohoo, let's just give Dan a little bit of extra spice in his life to contend with, because why not? But in that moment, when the thinking could have very easily gone down spiral, actually it is the strength of others that stopped you from getting too heavy, I guess. So I guess it's that allows you to see the bigger picture again, and then puts that piece in context to everything else, which keeps you human. And being really clear, I guess, about the value of that. Because that can completely shift the narrative for you. I mean, the mental narrative as opposed to the verbal narrative.
Because we all feel like we're alone, Laura, don't we? And we've got to deal with all these things ourselves, and it's just not the case.
Yeah, and I guess it's one of those things where it can feel very isolating when your life is different from others. And you sit on the outside sometimes and you think, oh, well, and you have to find different ways of offloading. So mine's post-it notes, offload my curly whirly brain. But for me, that allows me to go, no, I can see it now. It gives me that perspective, because the reality is that, look, just because of the nature of my world is that there are lots of people around me, but invariably they're doing school runs, various other things. So it's not quite so easy to necessarily draw them. But sometimes my curly whirly brain, what I need to do is just see it with post-it notes. My post-it notes.
Get it out of there, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And that itself just allows me to, remain human rather than get drawn to the noise. You used a different analogy. I forget, but the analogy that went through my head was we're all, we're in a dinghy with a sail, and the wind, which is, the noise and the pressure is taking us in one direction. Well, we can all just follow, But if we're just going to follow that, then invariably the boat's going to capsize. We have to actually work with the wind if we don't want to get carried away with that. And I think we forget that, to use your phrase, Mark, we lose or forget that, we don't have to be a passenger. We can be a driver in our own lives, or be at the helm. I don't know. What's your thoughts?
Well, one thing I think is interesting too is pressure also transforms things. So we do need pressure. Like, we do need a certain amount of pressure, because if you've no pressure whatsoever in life, things can be too easy, and then you don't learn and you don't grow without that application of pressure, with that amount of pressure. But where's the valve? So you can go, that's enough pressure for today, and let's kind of turn this off, because otherwise we feel like we're in that pressure cooker, and if you stay in a pressure cooker for too long, what is going to happen to you, but we stay in that space for too long. So that difference between being a passenger and being in the driving seat is our ability to choose. Is to choose, what am I going to do? What am I doing? What am I doing with my time? What are my thoughts? What am I thinking? What are my actions? What am I going to do differently? You wake up, if you're someone and you're on a Sunday night and go, oh Christ, this job again, I can't face it. If you're kicking into that for early on a Sunday, right? Like, what does that do? And okay, so maybe there's a certain amount of pressure. You have this job for whatever reason, you have that job, but you don't need to choose. You can choose a different thought about the job. You don't need to focus on what you don't like about it. You can focus on, well, it gives me this, it pays me this, does this for me. What can I gain out of this? And it's not like a nonsense, like, oh God, the window of the car is broken. Well, let's celebrate the fresh air that I'm getting, right? That's nonsense.
Well, you could, right? But that's not going to help you much.
No. So, and it's not like, suddenly switching and become positive psychology for a second. We come from these islands in this part of the world, and we have a natural cynicism that is bred into us from an early age. So we can't just jump to positive psychology. But what I prefer is positive reality. What is the reality of the situation we find ourselves in? What is the truth of this situation? Where am I responsible for the situation I find myself in? Because then I can choose, and I can take an action, and I can do something different. And by my action, I can see, well, how does that feel? Does that feel okay? Well, it feels a little bit less pressure. Actually, it feels like more pressure. But I'm in control of that, and I'm taking a measure of that. But we have to choose. By not choosing, we're making a choice, and we're letting it all happen to us, and hence it all comes in on us like this. And I think it's so necessary, because like I said at the start of it, if you look back through different eras, were people under less pressure? I think they were under less pressure, but I only think they were under less pressure is because there was so much less going on around people, in terms of, you tended to have a job, you tended to go home, you weren't consistently switched on and logged in, you weren't able to go home from work and log into work in the 90s at home, and continue to do your work. You went home, you had your dinner, work was gone. It was out of the way. You had other things going on in your life. So there was a freedom in that, because your choices were small choices. Now it feels like we've a lot of choices to make all the time. And that kind of pressure means we can just abdicate too much. And in that abdication, we've handed over the controls.
And I think that's it. So for me, it's like, it's not necessarily, staying human under pressure isn't necessarily about doing less or doing, or being different. It is remaining orientated enough within the space that we are, so that we can choose how we respond next. So we're not drifting, but we are responding rather than reacting into that step. I think that's the critical thing, because I think, you're right, Mark, in the world that it is today, there's always noise. It just depends whether we're going to dance to the noise and get potentially drifted away by the noise, or whether we're actually just going to stay grounded in whatever our next step is. Well, guys, as ever, absolute delight to join you in conversation this evening. I look forward to our next session, which will be a slightly different time, because some of us will be
warm and sunny,
escaping the rain, the sleet, and everything else.
You'll miss
sunny climate.
You'll miss it.
Or anything, but thank you as ever for tuning in, everyone, and enjoy.
Thank you, guys.
Cheers.